Black Widow. The city came alive with the first light of morning. Impatient car horns filled the air with their discordant symphony, and the sidewalks were bustling with people, moving like an organized ant colony. The tantalizing aroma of freshly baked bagels and the rich, earthy scent of coffee wafted from a nearby bakery, enticing the passers-by. Among the throng of early risers was Chad Dawson, a true city native. For the past 13 years, this particular bakery had been an integral part of his daily routine, a comforting ritual on his way to his job at Nancy Malone Incorporated, a corporate powerhouse. "Thank you," Chad smiled as he handed over the change to the cute cashier, who blushed in response to his charming wink and told her to keep the change. As he exited the bakery, his phone chimed with an incoming call from his fiancée, Faith. "Hey babe, what's up?" Chad answered, tapping his earpiece. "I just wanted to wish you an amazing day and tell you how much I love you." Faith's voice poured warmth into his ear. Chad's grin widened as he reciprocated his love, and for the next 10 minutes, their conversation drifted into the familiar and soothing exchange that only couples who deeply cared for each other could have. As he turned the corner, the grand silhouette of his office building loomed, and he gently reminded Faith that he was almost at work, signaling the need to conclude their call. Faith interjected, reminding him about the dinner plans with her sister later in the evening. Chad feigned surprise. "Oh, was that tonight?" "Chad, we talked about this yesterday. How could you forget?" Faith's disappointment was palpable. "Babe, I'm sorry, work has been overwhelming lately, and I might have to do overtime again tonight," he explained, slipping into his workplace with haste. Faith sighed, acknowledging her defeat. On the other end of the line, Chad sensed the disappointment, and he reassured her that he'd make it up to her next week. "Okay," Faith meekly replied. "Look, I've got to go. I just got into my office, but I promise to make it up to you. Love you," he concluded before hanging up. In the kitchen of their apartment, Faith held the phone, a single tear tracing a lonely path down her cheek as she whispered, "I love you too." At his office desk, Chad leaned back, and his friend Tyrone walked in, teasing him about getting scolded by his fiancée even before they tied the knot. Chad clarified that Faith only wanted him to meet her sister. Tyrone, ever the joker, asked if Faith's sister was attractive, and Chad humorously described her as "for an elephant," referencing an old photo Faith had shown him. Tyrone chuckled, "Big girls need love too." "Yeah, you can have her if you want," Chad replied playfully. "No thanks, I don't want to be a pancake if she rolls over on me," Tyrone quipped. Their light-hearted banter continued until a young colleague informed Chad that the boss wanted to see him right away. Stepping into Julie Trey's office, the formidable vice president of the company, Chad braced himself. Julie was known for her ruthless demeanor. She gestured for him to wait, wrapping up an important international call in a language Chad couldn't comprehend. Finally, Julie shifted her gaze to Chad, her expression remaining as impassive as ever. She approached him, her curves accentuated by a figure-hugging red dress. Unexpectedly, she grabbed him and kissed him passionately, igniting their lust, which soon led to a passionate encounter in her office. An hour later, Chad returned to his desk, his confidence inflated. In his mind, he was a seductive conqueror, and he saw Julie as merely a stepping stone in his career. He had pursued other female colleagues, always preferring married ones, believing they were fun to manipulate and would keep silent as they had more to lose. To him all these women were the same, but his fiancée was a different story. In Chad's mind, Faith was the leading lady of his life story. She was the ingenue, a character untouched by the harsh realities of the world. Chad believed that her innocence, her wide-eyed wonder at life's mysteries, made her the perfect foil for his ambitions. As Chad crafted the plot of their shared future, Faith took on the role of the homemaker. She would be the one to turn their house into a sanctuary of cleanliness and order, conjuring mouth-watering meals that would tease his taste buds and make his life feel effortless. In his narrative, Faith was the submissive partner, willingly deferring to his judgments and decisions. Chad thought she would trust him implicitly, the unquestioning ally who would embrace his vision for their shared future. Yet, beneath this carefully constructed story, Chad saw Faith as a pawn in his grand design. He believed he could manipulate her, molding her in his image, and if need be, bending her to his will. A loyal dog to its master. Around 9 in the evening, Chad strolled into Milo's, a bar that attracted weary professionals looking to unwind. It had become his hunting ground, a place where he pursued his extracurricular activities. Tonight, there were plenty of tempting prospects, a sultry blonde in the corner, another intriguing figure at the opposite end of the bar. But then, something caught Chad's eye. At the bar, there was a captivating presence, her back turned to him. Sitting alone on a bar stool, she wore an elegant white dress that clung to her curves. Chad had never seen a more enchanting figure in his life. She exuded an aura of elegance and allure that left him mesmerized. A knowing smile curled on Chad's lips as he decided that this woman would be his conquest tonight. He made his way to the bar and settled near her, initiating a conversation. Chad introduced himself as Nick, a name he had used many times before. As he turned to face her, he became momentarily entranced by her soft features and striking green eyes. Her red lips were inviting, and her perfume was intoxicating. She was like a goddess. As the night progressed, the enchanting woman's flirtatious gestures became more pronounced, lingering gazes, playful touches, and shared laughter. Chad knew it was only a matter of time before they'd leave for her hotel room, where he would add another notch to his proverbial bedpost. This goddess would soon belong to him. After a few more drinks, Chad and the enchantress walked out into the dimly lit parking lot, heading towards her car. She had invited him back to her hotel room for a night neither of them would forget. As he settled into the passenger seat of her car, an unusual sensation washed over him. Suddenly, the world around him began to blur and distort, like a nightmare slipping into reality. His vision dimmed, and his body felt heavy, as if weighed down by an invisible force. With each passing second, his awareness faded into an abyss of darkness. Panic welled up inside him, but he couldn't muster the strength to resist. It was as if an unseen hand had cast a spell over him. Everything went dark. Dazed and groggy, Chad slowly began to regain consciousness, his head pounding like 1,000 painful drums, and his surroundings appearing blurry. Gradually, clarity returned to his vision, revealing his goddess seated before him, cross-legged on a fold-out chair, holding a glass of red wine on a small round table beside her, with a bottle of wine nearby. "So, you're finally awake, Nick," she began, her voice tinged with anger. "Or should I just call you Chad?" Her eyes locked onto his, burning with fury. Chad whispered in disbelief, "What the hell?" The goddess paused for a moment, her powerful presence radiating as she continued sipping her wine. "Oh, men can be so foolish," she muttered. As Chad's vision cleared further, he realized he was in an abandoned sawmill, filled with stale dust and ancient cobwebs, as if untouched for years. Where am I?" Chad tried to speak, still feeling the effects of whatever substance she had dosed him with earlier. Setting her glass aside, she rose and approached Chad, her eyes wild and deranged, as if she relished the thought of consuming his flesh. Then, a sinister smile played on her lips as she gestured toward Chad's groin area, signifying he should look down. Panic surged through Chad as he obeyed her gesture. He was strapped to a massive wooden log, his manhood grotesquely exposed with 4 long spikes brutally driven through it. Chad screamed and writhed in agony, attempting to stand but quickly subdued by the excruciating pain of the nails. Tears welled in his eyes, and he was reduced to a frightened, helpless figure. He heard the sadistic laughter of his captor as she returned to her seat, casually picking up her glass of wine. Chad's mind raced as he struggled to comprehend who this woman was and how he could escape this nightmare. "Chad. Chad. Chad," she taunted, swirling the wine in her glass. "I must admit, for a scoundrel like you, you certainly provided ample material. It took me 4 nails to restrain that beast." She laughed again, taking another sip of wine. "Why are you doing this to me?" Chad cried out in defiance, his voice trembling. "Why?" The woman's tone dripped with hatred as she stared at Chad in disgust. In a low, seething voice, she replied, "Because you broke my sister's heart." Chad's face contorted with shock. "Sister? Stephanie?" He could hardly believe the words he had uttered. The woman before him bore no resemblance to the overweight figure he remembered from an old photograph. "You're not her. I saw a picture of her from Faith." He began to protest, still wincing from the pain below. Stephanie interrupted, "Oh, you mean when I was overweight? Faith keeps that picture to torment me. She can be quite cruel sometimes." Chad's thoughts swirled, struggling to make sense of this bewildering turn of events. Stephanie explained that Faith had known about his affair and had given him multiple chances to change. "Tonight was your last chance, Chad. If only you had come home." "What?" "I know you're slow, but please try to keep up. Do you ever wonder why I was coming to town tonight? She said your husband had passed away, and..." Chad started, but once again, Stephanie corrected him. "No, you fool. Faith is pregnant, and she was going to tell you tonight." "Pregnant?" "Yes, she's pregnant. If you had paid attention to your fiancé, you might have noticed." "Oh God," Chad whispered, guilt washing over him. Unfazed by his confession, Stephanie leaned back, still holding her wine glass, and regarded him coldly. "You sound just as sad as David before I killed him." Chad stared at her in horror as she smirked over her glass. "You look truly pathetic now. What happened to all that confidence you had at the bar?" Chad sat there, defeated, realizing he was trapped with this devilish woman. As the last drop of red wine slid down her throat, Stephanie stood up and placed the glass on the table. She turned slowly and picked up a small butter knife, tossing it to Chad. "You have only one way out of this, Chad. Let's see if you're a real man," she grinned wickedly, flicking a switch on her belt before exiting the room. Chad felt the log move, and from behind, the roar of a giant saw blade reached his ears. Chad screamed, trying to escape but was brought back down by the 4 nails. He looked at the knife, wondering what on earth he could do with it. Outside the sawmill, by Stephanie's car, Faith stood waiting anxiously. Stephanie walked up and hugged her little sister, who began to tear up. "It's okay, Faith. I'm here now. I won't let anyone hurt you anymore," Stephanie reassured her, sounding more like a mother than a sister. "Promise?" Faith whispered. In the next instant, they both heard a piercing scream of pain as the saw blade sliced into Chad. Then, as quickly as the screams had begun, they were silenced. Stephanie smiled. "I promise."